Why are so many players and huge name pros like Clix and Acorn freaking out that they are region locked to the wrong region for the entire season? Basically, if you don't know in Fortnite or how it previously worked in the last season, if you played, let's say, the Solo Victory Cup on EU, you could now only play the Solo Victory Cup on EU all season. But then you could then play the No Build Duo Cup, for example, on a different region, and then you could only play that tournament on that region. And that's how a lot of people thought this season was going to run as well. If you read the previous rules, that's what it says. They will be locked to that region for any subsequent sessions of that event. But the official rules have changed, and this was tweeted out by Coach Boo. So if you now notice, there's an extra sentence added to the rules. It says, you will be locked to that region for any subsequent sessions of that event, as well as all sessions for future events that season. Those last few words have only recently been added. And if you read that, it sounds like once you play one event on a region, you are now locked to that region for all events. The problem was we had the first official in-game tournament today, the Evaluation Cup, and because it's hosted only on EU, a whole bunch of pros like Clix and Acorn played it for fun because that's what we previously do. Because there's no Evaluation Cup on NA, it doesn't matter if you get region locked to EU because it's only on EU. But going off these rule changes, they might be locked for the entire season now, meaning Clix and Acorn and any player who played in this Evaluation Cup can only play competitive events on EU. Before you freak out if you played in this Evaluation Cup or you don't want your favorite pros being locked to the wrong region, I reached out to Osiris. They're basically a company that runs a bunch of data analytics on Fortnite. And they went into the game and they checked the back end of the system. And currently the way it's still working is if you play in a tournament, you are locked to that region for that tournament for the rest of the season. It doesn't look like this is what we're reading it as. So why would Epic go in and change the wording if nothing changed? And honestly, I don't know. My guess right now is the fact that I am trusting Osiris. I'm trusting the fact that the region locking has been incredibly confusing in the past. I don't think the region locking rule has changed, but I have no idea why they make it so confusing, going in and changing the wording to have it mean the exact same thing. So we might get clarification from Epic and it turns out nothing's changed. I hope if something has changed, if they really have changed the rules of region locking, that they would make an exception for this Evaluation Cup and actually make it a lot more publicly known that they've changed how region locking works. Otherwise, this is going to be a disaster for thousands, I think maybe even tens of thousands of people who played in this tournament. Your next question is probably going to be, Aussie, why does region locking even exist? And honestly, I don't know. The best kind of guess I've always had is the fact that Epic, under lots of pressure from different lawsuits, there was a whole bunch of different groups suing them over the last few years for how addictive Fortnite is. They wanted to put region locking in as a way that they could, in a court of law, be like, no, we're actively trying to stop people playing our game too much. We even region locked our tournaments, meaning the kids couldn't compete in multiple regions on the same day. That's literally the only reason I've been able to come up with, because the main metric Epic cares about for success of their tournaments is player base. The more people playing, the better for them. So why would they not want more people playing the tournament, even if they're from other regions? And I know you're probably thinking, oh, fairness, but at the same time, if you get beaten by someone on much higher ping on your own region, they deserved it. It's a tournament at the end of the day. It's not a charity. Like, you're not owed the money. If someone beats you, they beat you fair and square, and they've done it at a disadvantage. So I don't think that's why Epic would be region locking, but I really hope they haven't changed the rules of region locking. If they change the rules of region locking, I'd hope they'd just be getting rid of it altogether. Now, as I just mentioned, we have just had our first official tournament in Fortnite. So what is competitive looking like this season? Is the Rocket Ram too strong? Are the Mythics insanely busted? I want to go over everything. So firstly, the Rocket Ram has now been nerfed and then buffed again. So yesterday they put out a nerf where they made the damage on direct hits from 50 down to 25, and they made it no longer where the Rocket Ram, when it collides with a vehicle, moves it at all. Because if you guys saw, there was glitches like this where people were flying across the map in vehicles. That one's a little bit different, but the damage to players had a lot of people really upset. The Rocket Ram is a new, fun, exciting item, and the unique part about it is the damage through builds. The fact that you can ram through builds and still hit someone if someone's running away from you, if they're just hiding, is a really cool, fun item. But the biggest issue is obviously in competitive, when you have duos and even trios or squads if you're playing ranked, and players are just quadruple ramming through your box, just you're getting hit by 7 people on the front side of zone. This is a great example of what EU scrims looked like for a solo player just getting bounced around all over the place. It's a little bit hectic. Now, the problem is the damage, in my opinion, from the rocket ram in public matches isn't really that bad. It's a fun, goofy item. It's meant to be kind of exciting and it breaks apart builds, but the damage really isn't that bad, even when it does 50. But in competitive, it's a huge deal. So obviously they made that balance change with competitive in mind, and that upset a lot of casual players. Now it looks like Epic potentially has been listening to that feedback, because they've now reverted this. It's going back to doing 50 direct damage through builds, which is obviously gonna cause issues in competitive. It's that constant battle between making it fun and crazy in public matches, but then not having it be too overpowered in competitive. The obvious answer is just remove it from competitive, but it is the only major form of mobility right now. We have the Crash Pad Juniors, but if you haven't seen them, basically they don't break builds. They don't send you very far. Because they don't break builds, you can't use them as a duo properly. It's too hard to link them up. So basically no one is carrying the Crash Pads whatsoever. So you're only really left with the Rocket Ram in competitive because there are no shockwaves. So I don't think Epic is just going to vault them from competitive. So they have to try to balance it in both playlists. But it looks like it's going back to the original Rocket Ram, and comp players are just going to have to deal with it. I will mention, after watching the games today, the Rocket Ram in competitive, it's an interesting one. Yes, it's very annoying, and there's situations where someone's just gonna fly into your box and send you off a mountain. Half the issue is the knockback and the fall damage, but ultimately, it's really risky to use. More often than not, when players use the Rocket Ram, they end up dying and putting themselves out of position, rather than the opposite, where it's way too overpowered. Like, I would definitely argue items like the hammer were 10 times stronger than the Rocket Ram. Yes, it's crazy when you look at it in like a 1v1 situation, but you've got to remember, you're trying to use this Rocket Ram that gives you a massive delay, breaks a lot of the builds around you, and sends you slowly flying through the sky with the best players in the world, who all have these new twin mag ARs, or potentially the MK7 Mythic, that will just absolutely obliterate you. You're just basically a slow moving Kovacs course at that point. So it's not quite as strong as I originally expected, but it's causing a lot of issues just because of the chaos it creates. Obviously, if you use it well, and I'm sure pro players are going to find out better ways to use it. Reese Hub has just posted a fantastic video on all the different phase-ins and crazy ways you can use it, but you can use it smarter, but at the same time, it's not as busted as I originally expected. Also, when I'm just playing ranked and pubs, for example, I would much rather fight someone with a Rocket Ram than fighting someone with shockwaves. They are not as annoying to deal with, and if the player tries to run from me again, I can just beam them. A lot of people are actually asking for the Rocket Ram to be vaulted from competitive and instead the shockwaves put in, but it's going to be interesting to try and see how duos figure out these Rocket Rams. Towards the end of the Evaluation Cup, I saw more and more duos actually choosing to have neither of them run Rocket Rams or Crash Pads and just go back to a double weapon, triple med loadout and carry no mobility like we did last season. Now, the big question a lot of people are asking is, what shotguns are the pros using? What would I recommend? And now, it's a bit of an interesting one. The shotgun loot pool right now is possibly the biggest issue. It's probably most people's downside with what is, in my opinion, one of the most fun seasons we've had in a long time. Personally, my shotgun ranking, and this includes exotics, is the Breacher shotgun, the exotic Breacher. If you don't know, the first shot shotgun augment that isn't supposed to increase headshot damage actually does for the Breacher, so you can do over 200 headshot damage with the Breacher if it wasn't already busted enough. Then I would pick the exotic Maven. Then I would go with the Sharp Tooth shotguns. I really do enjoy them. They are really the only hard, heavy hitting shotgun in the game right now. I know they max damage at 165 at gold, but they have that slow fire rate, high hitting damage that is very consistent. I would then actually go with the Maven and then the new shotgun. I really do think the new shotgun is the weakest shotgun in the season. It just doesn't fit either. It doesn't hit slow and hard like a pump, and it doesn't have that fast fire rate like the Maven does. I know it shoots roughly as fast as the Maven, but it just doesn't, it feels clunky to me. I don't know if it's the pellet spread, but I don't find myself doing as consistent damage. And I think the biggest issue with these fast fire shotguns, like even the Maven and the new shotgun, is you can't do a lot of structure damage. If I'm versing someone with a pump shotgun, every time I go for an edit peek, they can just pump take the wall, and I can't take it back off them with my shotgun. It leaves you very, very vulnerable, and when you verse really good players, it feels awkward. I'm not talking about against bad players. Any shotgun will work against bad players. When you're versing a really good player with good angles, good piece control, and you have the new shotgun, it is absolutely miserable if they have a hard hitting pump. Now let's talk about mythics. Which ones are the pros running? If you don't know, in the current season, they spawn randomly in the vaults. You can't guarantee you're ever going to get one of them, but by far the strongest mythic, and I'll have no debate on this, is the MK7. That assault rifle makes you feel like you have aimbot. It shoots so fast, does so much damage with almost no recoil. I think it's one of the only assault rifles that could ever rival the pulse fire. It is just absurd how strong this gun is. Now, a lot of the SMGs, the drum gun and the Stinger's SMG, yes, they're mythic, but honestly, if you look at the stats and use them, I would still rather at a high rarity combat SMG, and I'm not kidding. The twin mag SMG AR is just so incredibly strong. You can use it at range. It's still decent hip fire. I don't really find myself or any of the pros really using them. Kids charge shotgun is a bit of a flex item. I see a lot of pros using it. It's amazing in duos, having your teammate piece controller edit for you and hit that big shot, but in solos, it's a bit clunky to try and use. Infinite chug jug is a bit of a fun item. It's a bit of a flex. It's nothing too strong, but it can be really good in duos especially. Outside of that, I'm not really seeing the pros use many of the other mythics. Let's talk about utility items, and I didn't think I'd be talking about this because the sniper rifle isn't meant to be in competitive, but it currently is. You can get the sniper rifle out of the key chests in competitive, so I don't know if this is intentional. They're not supposed to be in competitive, so there is a good chance this will get changed in the future. We do have C4 in competitive, which honestly I kind of glanced over. They never said it wasn't going to be in competitive in the patch notes. I just kind of assumed it wouldn't be, but a lot of pros are running it and doing crazy phase-in tricks and just really going crazy with them, and they drop out of the highest bag, so they are extremely easy to get. Like I said, no one is really running the crash pad juniors. Almost everyone is running rocket ram, or if they're choosing to not run the rocket ram for the reason I talked about earlier, they're just running triple meds and just playing tarp simulator like we did last season. Next up, the big one, server lag. How are the servers actually performing right now? If you've been watching any of the custom scrims, we've had dig money scrims going on NA, they've been super stacked. We've had EU pro scrims running through Noble. We've had big third-party tournaments like the Strelson $20,000 Cup, and all of the stacked games in customs look really good. So I was incredibly hopeful competitive would follow suit, and honestly, it did. Competitive servers look really solid right now. There was a few games where I saw some pretty bad lag, but we had active surge in almost every game in the finals, really stacked end games, and they looked really good, much better than last season. A lot of people are upset about this. Oh, why are the servers so good now when there's no FNCS? And while I agree with that, it's a little bit sad they couldn't have been better last season. I'm looking at the positives. Now we can actually have big third-party tournaments. We have plenty of tournaments coming up, Duo Cash Cup, Solo Victory Cup, Mix Up Mondays. We have a lot of tournaments, but obviously without FNCS, it'll always feel like there's some gaps. But with custom servers now actually functioning, hopefully we can get some big sponsor and third-party tournaments because pros will actually want to play in them now the servers function, which has me really excited.